Hi, everyone from the shores of the Gulf of Mexico here in Clearwater, Florida. Welcome to our first episode of 2022 of On the Sports Clock. I'm your host, Tyler Onstadt. Today's show is special. The guy I'm interviewing is someone who I grew up watching coach the Southwest Missouri State and now Missouri State Bears. He was also the last men's basketball coach at Missouri State, or Southwest Missouri State, and the first of Missouri State due to the name change of the university in 2005. I have very fond memories of watching this guy lead the Bears for 9 years, which included 4 NIT appearances. He also previously was the head coach at Oral Roberts University and most recently Southern Illinois University. He also spent time working under Bill Self at Oral Roberts and the University of Kansas. He's now an advisor to the head coach at Oklahoma State. It is my pleasure to welcome on Coach Barry Hinson. Coach, how are things going? And I have to ask, being a Midwest guy from Willard, Missouri, and now living in Florida, is the barbecue still as good in the Midwest? And I'm sure it is much better than the fake barbecue we have down here.
Well, I would agree with that. The people on the East Coast, they don't really know what barbecue is. First of all, it's great to be on the show.
Thank you.
Or on the podcast, I guess. And second thing is, there's always great barbecue in the Midwest, and Oklahoma certainly. The home of Oklahoma Joe's we've got quite a few tasty spots around here.
Absolutely. And I have to ask you too. So my mom was reminding me the other day, she used to work at Downtown Barbecue in Willard, Missouri. And she said you were out there on a recruiting visit. They were hosting a tournament. I believe it's the Tri-State Classic or 4-State Classic. And one of the recruits that I ended up going to Missouri State was playing there, and she said you actually came into the restaurant and sounded like you had a good time there or enjoyed the barbecue. Not sure if you remember that or not, but Downtown Barbecue, that was my spot growing up.
Well, I tell you, Tyler, I have a line that I've always used, and it's the worst barbecue I ever had was sensational. So I'm a big barbecue guy, and I always enjoy my time. The only problem that I have with barbecue places, if you have cloth napkins and it's not a hand towel, I'm probably not going to eat at those places. So I'm more of a butcher paper towel kind of guy, or if you have hand towels, you just go to a whole nother different level.
Absolutely. I hear you on that. And like I said, we could talk for an hour on this podcast and make it all about barbecue, I'm sure. But I want to get into your coaching career. Obviously, you've been very successful, and I just have very fond memories of watching you coach. And you know, you brought in guys who have become close friends of mine, like Trevor Fisher, who was my director of basketball operations I worked under as a manager when I worked under Paul Lusk, and Anthony Shavies has become a really close friend of mine. So I want to talk about all that. And want to go back, though, talk to me a little bit about how you got into coaching and your story as you progressed in your coaching career.
Well, I wasn't going to be a coach. I came to Oklahoma State in 1979, and I had just finished an entire summer speaking and introducing and traveling around the state of Oklahoma, literally in the summer of 78 and the fall of 79, to try to get David Bourne elected to the United States Senate. And my whole intention was, he was a governor of Oklahoma at the time, and I was very fortunate. I'm a 17, 18-year-old young man traveling the state of Oklahoma with the governor. And I can remember traveling in Oklahoma Highway 1, which was the number 1 highway patrolman that was assigned to the governor. And I had all that opportunity, and I decided to enter pre-law political science. I was going to be the next governor of Oklahoma one day, and I wanted to do that, convince my wife that's what I was going to do. She married me on those premises. And then when I came to Oklahoma State, I couldn't afford to go to college, so I had to work with a college work study program back then. And it's called Pell Money today, but back then it was called the BEOG, the Basic Educational Opportunity Grant. And I had to work 20 hours a week here on campus as part of my job to pay for my schooling. And then I also worked off campus too. I painted houses and things like that. And then I ended up working for an office supply company, and I do odds, ends, and jobs and all this stuff just to make it work. But about a month into working here at the college work study program, they assigned me at that time to Gallagher Hall. It's now called Gallagher-Iba Arena. And I would report every day to former Cowboy basketball players, a gentleman by the name of Sam Aubrey that played for Mr. Iba, And of course, Mr. Iba was here at the time. And I would report to these guys and just do my chores, which were basically, I was a janitor. And I have a great respect for anybody in the janitorial business or anybody that does those jobs at night, because I did it. I cleaned toilets, mopped floors, replaced things. I can remember back in the days when it was legal, they had this spray aerosol that you spray on gum that freezes it. Now, that may be why I've said some of the stupid stuff that I've said over my life. I breathe so much of that stuff. But I got to the point where I was around Mr. Iba and around college basketball, and I decided this is what I wanted to do for my life. And I never forget, my advisor said, if you ever want to be the governor of Oklahoma, the greatest route is through education. If you tell teachers you're going to raise their salaries, you'll have everybody in the state of Oklahoma working for you in order to be the governor. So I thought that was a pretty good route at the time. And I fooled my wife, and 41 years later, we're still fooling her. And here I am, a college basketball coach, which actually started coaching 7th grade AAU basketball, summer league basketball. And my first paying job was an 8th grade basketball coach here at Stillwater Junior High. And I am back in a community in which some of those 8th graders that played for me and some of those 7th graders that played for me in AAU now have children, and I see their children on a daily basis.
Absolutely. And are you still there?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it cut out. Absolutely. And so you're going up through Stillwater Junior High and Stillwater High School, and coached at a couple high schools there before getting into the college coaching ranks. So kind of talk to me. You started out as an assistant at Stillwater High School, and then assistant at Edmond, and then became the head coach at Bishop Kelly. What was that kind of transitioning from an assistant to head coach for the first time at that level, and then going from there to Oral Roberts?
Well, it was really, you have to remember back at that time that there were only 5 classes in the state of Oklahoma. There are now 6. And 4A was a fairly large class. And of course, the catch to the story is I started at the junior high level, and then I worked my way up to the sophomore coach at Stillwater High School. And the reason I was able to do that is because my former coach, Jerry Havens, which coached me at Marlow High School, was now the athletic director and a head basketball coach at Stillwater. And that's really, as much as getting involved in Gallagher and being around Mr. Iba, and Paul Hinson was the coach at Oklahoma State at the time, as much as anybody's had an impact on me, my high school coach, Jerry Havens, probably had as much, if not more, impact on my coaching career at that time than anyone. And certainly he helped me with my foundation. And then I left Stillwater. I went to Edmond Memorial, which at that time was the 2nd largest high school in the state of Oklahoma, and worked for a guy by the name of Mike De La Garza. And Jerry Havens and Mike De La Garza did a lot to shape who I am today and who I was as a coach. And then I was 26 years old, Tyler, when I got a chance to go to Bishop Kelly, and I was the youngest coach at the class 4A, 5A level at the age of 26. Nobody that age could ever get a job specifically at one of those schools. And I was very fortunate because Mike De La Garza was a strong Catholic, and he had spoken at a Knights of Columbus, and they said, we're going to have to hire a coach. They asked Mike. Mike said, you need to hire my guy. And that's basically how I got hired. It's funny. I really never interviewed for any job that I ever received. I was always contacted by someone else, and they asked me to come and interview. And it was the same at Southwest Missouri State. I'll never forget the day I got the phone call. I'll never forget the day I got the phone call to interview at Oral Roberts University. And I got that phone call from Richard Roberts, the president of the university. So I've been very fortunate in my days that people have always reached out to me, and I really never had to apply for a job. I was always blessed and by people reaching out to me. But that's how I was in high school. And then after 6 years at Bishop Kelly, I got a phone call to interview for the head coaching job at Oral Roberts University. Now, thank goodness, I've not had a lot of mature moments in my life, but this was one of them. I knew I wasn't ready to be the head coach at Oral Roberts University. And Bill Self said, if you'll go in and talk about me, I'll go in and I'll talk about you. And they interviewed Andy Stoglin, at that time was Nolan Richardson's assistant at Arkansas, and Tim Carter from Northwestern University out of Chicago was an assistant that interviewed for the head coaching job along with Bill Self and I. And needless to say, they hired Bill Self. I was able to join Coach Self's staff. I was with Coach Self 4 years as an assistant. And then when they hired us at Oral Roberts University, the two of us, they said they had hired their head coach and their next head coach, and they stuck with it. And President Roberts hired me after 4 years being Bill Self's assistant. I was the head coach at Oral Roberts University for 2 years. And then on a Sunday afternoon, a security guard came up to my house, because at that time you lived on campus at Oral Roberts. And a security guard drove up and said, a guy by the name of Bill Rowell is calling you and trying to get a hold of you, wants to talk to you about the job at Southwest Missouri State. So I called Bill Rowell, which he quickly informed me it was Rowe.
Yep.
And I talked to Bill Rowe, and he said, I know this is short notice, but can you interview on Tuesday? And my wife and I both drove to Springfield, Missouri. We interviewed with Bill Rowe, and I can remember that Ed Penninger was there. Rest in peace. What a great man. What a great blessing he was to that university. Greg Onstott was there. I believe Brent Dunn was there, or Brent Dunn. And I can't remember, but there were a couple other boosters. But I remember the interview, and then, of course, I got home. And I may have interviewed on a Monday, and they called me on a Tuesday. That may have been what it was. And they offered me the job. And I can remember Steve was going to do a banquet after their Sweet 16 run, and they asked me to come up at that time for the banquet. And I knew at that time what a great place it was and what an unbelievable spirit about that community. And, of course, I'll never forget what Bill Self said, and it's so true. He said, it's the worst time ever to take that job. But he said, you have to take that job. It's such a better job than what you have now. But he said, I am telling you, this is going to be a really tough situation for you. And looking back, he was not Nostradamus, but you still today, Steve did such a wonderful job, and that Sweet 16 run set the expectations at a level that we just weren't able to attain in the 9 years that I was there. And I'm proud, Tyler, of what we accomplished there. I think 2006 probably will be embedded in me for the rest of my life, and 2007, when you had an RPI of 21 and an RPI of 32 that doesn't get into the NCAA tournament. And still to this day, it's the lowest RPI ever to not be selected in the NCAA tournament. But, you know, we can cry over spilt milk, or we can see how things shape our lives. And had I not been released at Southwest Missouri, Missouri State, then I would have never had the opportunity to coach at Kansas and be a part of a Final Four run and to play in a national championship game. So as we look back, it's always amazing how we think we're in charge, but we're really not. And I've been truly blessed, and I wouldn't take my time back at Southwest Missouri State. I absolutely love that community. The sting of being fired has far left me. I love the people of that community. I love that region so much. And as I got further and further down the line, there was really just a few people in the community that wanted to get me fired. And there was a president that absolutely opened up his ears to them. And he's no longer there. Matter of fact, he got fired too. So the sting is no longer there. And I was hired. You know, they always tell you as a basketball coach or any coach that you don't want three things you can't have happen. You can't have a new AD, you can't have a new president, and you can't have a new facility being built. And I had three of those things that were in the process of happening when I was there. But I remember just like it was yesterday, we just gotten beat at Wichita State. And I can remember we went up there and we had Shane Laurie in a boxing sparring helmet that we had permission to put him on the floor in case we got down to 4 players. We had fouled out 2. We thought we were really going to have to do it because Shane had suffered a concussion. And what we did was we went into overtime, and I thought, I'll be dang, we're going to have to put Shane out there if we foul anybody else out. but we lost in overtime. And I can remember Coach Rowe being extremely emotional. And it's probably one of the greatest moments I've had with an athletic director. I just looked at him and I said, Coach, it's okay. It's okay. I said, you're not my athletic director. You've been like a father to me. I don't blame you for this. We both know what's going to happen. I'm going to do my best to try to take us to the NCAA tournament, and then that'll handle all this. But if we don't, I'm not blaming you. Both of us sitting here right outside the meeting were crying like two babies, like we just got somebody got married or we'd been to a funeral. And I'll never forget. It's one of the greatest moments of my life with an athletic director, because it got to that point in 9 years. He wasn't my athletic director. He was a dear friend. He was a true mentor, and I love him. I love him as much as I loved my father, and he was such a father figure to me. So the 9 years that I spent there, some of the greatest friends, and I still have them today. Marty Prather, I still eat at Domino's just because of him. The Thompson family, the entire Thompson family, every one of them were so good to me while I was there, and I made lifelong friends. And Bill Pitt today still will reach out to me, and we'll talk. John Brinkman's the craziest sucker I think I've ever known in my life.
He's running for Senate now too.
Yeah, well, and that just, well, if he's crazy, that's where he needs to be. He needs to be in politics. But lifelong friends, and probably one of the greatest preachers I've ever had, Dr. John Marshall there at Second Baptist Church. The community was so good. We moved my mother and father there. My father died in Springfield, and my mother died literally 6 months after moving for Springfield. So it's just a really great area, and the people of Southwest Missouri still to this day mean so much to me. And we go back now and we feel like it's home.
Absolutely. And kind of going back there too. So your first game back at Missouri State, that was my second year as a manager there. And it was my job to go out and meet the team bus to let the visitors in. And, we would take turns doing that. And I told Sam McMahon, who was the director of basketball operations at the time, I said, I want to be there to greet Coach Hinson and the Salukis when they come here. And I remember, opening that door and seeing you walk and just seeing you, kind of take it all in and shaking your hand and just saying, welcome back, Coach Hinson. And then you all are warming up. I'm setting up the clock and everything. And you looked at me and you said, Coach Rowe is coming in to watch shoot around. Can you go let him in? And at that point, Coach Rowe had already texted me that he was coming in, or Sam had texted me. And just to be there for that moment, I guess I could say I was the first person to that you saw coming into the building, but it meant a lot to me and the Springfield community having you come home like that. And even though you all lost the game, it was just a very, for those of us that grew up Bears fans, it was a very emotional and very kind of bittersweet type of day.
It was a very emotional day. I remember that day vividly, and I was scared to death because I really didn't know how I would be received. I was scared to death. Mark Fisher kept telling me, "Oh, shut up." He said, if Mark could have hit me, he'd probably hit me. But he said, "You have no idea how these people love you in this community." And after being at Kansas for 4 years, being removed, so almost 5 years removed, coming back into that facility, it was an emotional game. And quite frankly, probably the emotion. Paul did such a great job and his staff did such a great job, but I couldn't coach that game because all my mind was spinning 100 miles an hour. But I got my mind collected because after that, we pretty much did a pretty good job there when we came to Southwest Missouri. So
yeah.
I think at one time we won 9 games in a row, but it was, for me to tell you that game wasn't circled on the calendar, I'd be a liar.
And I went through the same thing, Coach. I was actually thinking, so, I worked 3 years under Paul, and then I worked a year under Kelly Harper on the women's side. And then I got offered the opportunity to go up to Loyola, Chicago, and work under Cheryl Swoops for a year. And my first time to Missouri State, I thought of you because the emotion. Now, again, not everybody there knows who I am versus you, but still walking out on that court. And I thought, if Coach Hinson can get through it, I can sure as heck get through it. And I did, but it was a very, very emotional time. And I was only a year removed from Missouri State at that point. So I say I share the same kind of feelings you do in terms of the emotions, but it's a special place for both of us.
It is. Tyler, I think one of the hardest things was for me was that I had spent 5 years on the building committee, and Mr. Hammonds was such a good friend. And I still to this day tell the story. Every time we'd take a trip, he'd call me and he said, you want to get on the mule today and go here or there, and we're going to go look at this property. And he would call, and he called his plane the Mule. And I just, to be on that committee and to help with the design and go through everything, and to not being able to coach and knowing that we were going to get to play Arkansas to open up the building, because the reason we were going to play Arkansas is because of Bill Rowe and myself, because we had to move a football game of all things. And Coach Rowe was so great at finagling. I get kidded all the time, but he would kid me and I'd kid him that we both still had our fourth grade milk money. But one of the things that Coach Rowe did when K-State wanted us to move the game to help with Auburn and Arkansas, whatever, but Arkansas and Auburn and K-State were all involved in this deal. But we ended up getting Arkansas involved in the opening game. And, to just have that taken away at that time, it was just such a hard time. And then, of all things, the hardest thing without question was having to leave the community in which I raised my youngest daughter, a graduate of Glendale High School and a graduate of Missouri State University, and to leave my church, to leave my community, to leave my school, and to leave the faculty and the coaches that I had the opportunity to be around for 9 years. There was so much tied into that. So yeah, there was a lot of emotion, and coming down that tunnel and seeing that new facility, and of course walking in. And my first thing was, if you remember right, you escorted me into Hammonds because I had to go back in.
Yes.
There. And I was the last coach to ever coach a game in there. And I remember that game. That game was great because if you remember, Drake was rated number 24 in the country.
Yep.
And we beat them. It was my last game to coach at Hammonds. And I'll never forget, I can't remember who it was. It may have been Ron Boaz came into the locker room and said, Coach, the fans won't leave. They want a curtain call. I mean, the only thing I'd seen a curtain call was for the Cardinals after you hit a home run. And, they asked me to come back out there, and Barry's brigade wouldn't leave, and there were fans that wouldn't leave, and they gave me a standing ovation. And even right now, I'm chills are on my back and my spine here. But someone took a picture of me walking back out for the last time on Hammonds, and it was a special night. And Devin Mitchell was probably as best as I've ever seen a player play that night, and how he dominated the game. And so a lot of great memories, Tyler. Thanks for bringing them back.
Yeah, definitely. And talking about a couple people there, you mentioned Coach Rowe, and I just have to say too, he has been a very, very close mentor of mine, and of course his daughter Nancy. And I didn't know this at the time, but I was heavily involved in speech and debate, and Nancy Wedgeworth was her name at the time. She was the head coach at Parkview, and Parkview always gave me trouble when I was, debating. And then, so I basically, grew up around the Rowe family, and Coach Rowe, when I graduated, I did not tell Coach Rowe that I was having a graduation party until like the day of. And I invited Keith Gunn, who I was working under Keith at the time as the video coordinator, and Keith Gunn, Paul Evans, and Coach Rowe, despite not knowing till the day of, drove out to Willard to be at my graduation party. And it just meant the world to me. And I'll always have a special place for people like that. And I remember you mentioned Ron Boaz too. I remember that game after the game. he walked by me with because at that time, if you remember, the visiting locker room was still over in Hammond's, and then our locker room was over in Hammond's as well. And so we would cross paths, and Ron Boas had tears in his eyes, and he said, Tyler, I'm going to say hi to Barry. And so you had a special impact on a lot of people there. So I'm glad you mentioned Ron as well.
Well, there were so many people that, one of the things my dad taught me was to treat everybody you meet as if they're the most important person in the world. And I've tried to do that my entire life. And there's been moments when I've let the anger get the best of me. But when it comes to people and hurting people or hurting people's feelings, I take great pride that's happened very minimal in my life. And I'm a people person, and I always have been, always will be. And I really care about people. I'm an emotional guy. I always have been. I would speak at booster luncheons and get emotional about how our guys would play or tear up. And I'm the guy that the last 15 minutes of Marley and me has to have a box of Kleenexes, So I'm that guy, but I'm not going to apologize. That's who I am. And I've always been that person. And, there was just such a great connection because, Tyler, you don't get to spend 9 years anywhere anymore in this profession. It's almost unheard of. And if you look at it, my 3 coaching professions were 6 years, 9 years, and 7 years. And in this day and age, that's really, really hard to do. And like I said, I've only been a head coach at 3 places, and that's going to be it. I'm not going to be a head coach. I've had the chance. I've been here at Oklahoma State now 3 years, and for 3 years in a row, I've had a chance to go back and be a head coach, and I don't want to anymore. I'm the mentor now. I'm the old guy. I tell people, especially those that like Star Wars, I just said, I'm Yoda. I'm Yoda on the bench, and I enjoy it. And I have this ability to serve others and to be happy about it. And it doesn't bother me at all. Anything that I can do to help Mike Boynton to be a better head coach, to make him look better, to win a game, to help in a community, that's my job. And I have no quarrels whatsoever doing it. And nothing that he gives me is beneath me. And I'm just willing and ready to help because this is my alma mater. And I can't think of very many places that I would have gone back to. They probably limited to 2. It would have been here or Kansas because of my relationship with Bill Self. But I'm home where I went to school, and I'm home in my state where I went to high school, elementary school, and junior high. So it's just, I've been blessed. I really have been.
And another thing too, Coach, I want to point out for our listeners is, I mean, you've had success as a head coach. You had the NIT appearances and arguably should have been in the NCAA tournament. Obviously, I remember that. I remember sitting there watching, and when that last bracket popped up and didn't get in, my heart just sank. And should have been in, but you graduated your players. I believe it was a 90, was it 46 of 48? And please, if I'm wrong, correct me, but 46 of 48.
It was 49 out of 52.
Yep.
And then later, one of them that didn't graduate came back and graduated. So now to make us 50 of 52, we had a young man playing overseas at the time, Mike Wallace, and Mike would have been 51. And I don't know if Mike ended up getting his degree or not. And then we had another young man that would not have received his degree if the Lord himself would have come back. So we were not going to ever be 100%. But we ended up being 50, 52, and I say 50, 49 under my direction, but Joe Bell Hopper made sure that number 50 got through. So 50 of 52, pretty good for our guys at the time. And it's funny that you bring that up because, Tyler, in all honesty, then when they contacted me about Southern Illinois University, they were 342nd out of 347 schools academically at that time. And there were only 5 schools below us. And I can remember one of our administrators, when we met with the NCAA, he said, this is appalling. And one of the reasons I was able to get that job was because of the reputation that we had with graduating our players. And we were, for those that are listening to the podcast, we were literally at that time called APR points, 3 points away from receiving the death penalty at Southern Illinois University. And we were supposed to get to 800, and we were hovering the year before we got there. We were like 764 on a flotating or a rotating average, and we couldn't make a mistake. Could not make a mistake. No mistakes. I remember Mario Mocha, the athletic director, asked 199.5. Will they round up? And without hesitation, they go, nope. And so we knew it was real. And the first 2 years at Southern Illinois University, all we did was worry about academics. We couldn't even focus on basketball because if we knew we would receive the death penalty. And we had already had a contingency plan to play 12 walk-ons, so we wouldn't lose everybody if they were going to put us on probation, and we would play 12 walk-ons and go 0-30, and then come back the next year and redshirt all those guys. In this day and age, that would have never happened because everybody would have gone into the portal. So the first 3 years at Southern Illinois University, which we had losing records all 3 of those years, we were just paying the pauper for what happened academically. And it was really hard. And it was really a hard time on me because I'd only had, as a head coach, I'd only had one losing season. And if you remember, that was when Scott Brakebill broke his arm, and he was our best player. And we played through the Valley. We literally brought Manuel Randall out of a red shirt and started Manuel Randall as a freshman for the first Valley game. And bless his heart, he looked like a deer in headlights, but certainly he helped us in a tremendous way. And that's the only losing season we ever had at Southwest Missouri, was when Scott broke his arm.
Yeah, and you bring up you brought up again the academic situation there at SIU, and I like to keep my podcast very positive, but I want to bring up, and the only reason I'm bringing this up is because the purpose of my podcast is to inspire, and I was personally very inspired. You know, when you were at Southern Illinois, you made some news over a post-game press conference, and I, you know, again, trying to stay positive, but there was a line in there that you said where, you know, if you lose your job, you have to look at your family and say, you're going to be okay. And I just think, you know, hearing that from you and somebody who, you know, is inspiring, you know, when I lost my job at Loyola, I looked at my family and said, you know, I'm going to be okay. And I was. And so I just think a lot of good can come out of situations that maybe are what we call temporary inconveniences at the time.
Well, I mean, you brought up Anthony and Trevor earlier on, and they would be able to tell you that we talked about that all the time as a team. We would say, you know, you think this is hard right now. Wait until you lose your job. Wait until you've gone to work for 27 years in a row, and you're sitting there and you're having to look at your daughter, which is at Glendale High School, or actually at that time at Missouri State, and your wife, and you're having to look at them and just say, hey, it's going to be okay. I don't have a job, but it's going to be okay. And that was the hardest part for me, was going to work for 27 years in a row, getting up, having a place to go. And the next thing you know, I don't have a place to go. Now, let me tell you something. When you're like me and you can't sit still and you're at home every day with your wife, that's not a recipe for success. I mean, that's when I took up cycling. Literally, I had a neighbor down the street, and he rode a bike all the time. I started riding a bike. Well, you know, for lack of things to do, I just get on a bike, start riding. Well, sure enough, I'm riding 50 miles a day. And I'm like, I mean, because I don't have anything else to do except Wednesdays. Wednesday was grocery ad day, and I'd go to about 7 grocery stores because I had a game plan of where, you know, pork and beans were 4 for $1, or Del Monte Blue Lake green beans were on sale, and I'd go over to a Price Cutter or whatever and get something here or there. And then, but, you know, it was just, that's the only thing I had to do. Thank goodness I got hired on at Kansas in October, or I would have probably I would have been on a segment of 48 hours with my wife. One of us would have been being interviewed for killing each other.
Yeah. And the only reason, Coach, I brought that up too was, if anybody's listening and you're in a situation where something negative has happened, it's going to be okay. And that, I think sports can teach people a lot of life lessons. We talked about your graduation rate success. These are players you had who, can look back and say, yeah, I played at Southern Illinois or Missouri State or Oral Roberts, and I played in front of a sold out crowd of, at Bradley, where, they're serving beer on that alcohol, where they serve alcohol on that ice rink court they've got, but really that degree they're going to have is what's going to stick within the rest of their life. And what they got taught by a coach is what they're going to experience the rest of their life. So I just think it's really inspiring. And looking back on your track record, wins, obviously great, they're there, but what you did, and I know, Trevor Fisher means a lot, or you mean a lot to Coach Fisher, and just so proud of him and his career, and Anthony Chaves, and I could go down the list. And so as a SMS fan, just appreciate all you've done for that university and all the stops you've been at.
Well, I appreciate that. I've been, like I said, I go back. I think that the typical line that has been said today repeatedly over and over is I've been blessed. And, and I thought when I had that rant at Southern Illinois that my career was probably coming to an end. And I'll never forget what Bill Self said. He called me and he said, this would be the best thing that ever happened to you. And I think he's right, because I think what happened was it showed everybody the passion that I had for my job and for my players. And the great thing about Southern Illinois in that area, that's an old coal mining area. Yep. It's blue collar and my kind of people, and just hard working people. And Jackson County is the poorest county of 102 counties in the state of Illinois. It's the poorest county, and people in that community, they just know how to work, and they're people. And I just absolutely loved it. And I'll never forget, we came back in for the very next game after that rant, and they gave a standing ovation to our crowd and to me when we came out of the tunnel. And I just said, this is where I need to be. And it's another community that, it was different than Springfield because the socioeconomic status of that county versus Greene County was so much, economically was so much lower, but the people there were used to just kind of hard times. Coal industry was obviously during the elections and all that stuff. It was really a high topic, and people had lost their jobs. Communities that were booming at one time were no longer, and it just really hard-nosed, tough people. And if you look at their runs through the years where they were really good, back when Bruce Weber and Matt Painter and Chris Lowry, those three guys there, and even Coach Heron, they just kind of personified those teams and how hard they played and all these things. And I still, I stick by what we did. Our last 4 years, Tyler, Southern Illinois, we were fourth, third, second, third. Mm-hmm. And we went from 10th when we got there to fourth, third, second, third. And I still stick with what we did and what we accomplished there while we were there.
Absolutely. And kind of talking too, I know you're at Oklahoma State now, and want to talk a little bit about that before we get into our last segment, which is Tyler's 5. But I have to ask you two questions. Number one, what was your favorite college basketball memory as a head coach? And number two, I know you mentioned earlier the Ron Boaz coming in and saying, Coach, they won't go home. They want a curtain call. But outside of that, what was your favorite memory at Hammond Student Center?
Well, since we're kind of reminiscing with Southwest Missouri State, I think the best moment for Southwest Missouri State for us, I'll give you two moments that I think were really important. We were down 21 in a semifinal game to Southern Illinois, 17 at half, 21 in the first half, and it ended up being 17 at halftime. And Nathan Ballou hit a layup, I think, with around 40 seconds to take the lead of that game. And that was probably one of the best games I've been a part of. While we were at Missouri State and Southwest Missouri State, I think we played in 3 championship games, and I can remember getting beat by Northern Iowa in double overtime on a really bad push-in call on Tamar Macklin, and I'll never forget that call. Anthony Chavies had hit a 3 in the corner right in front of our bench, and they called a push-off on Tamar, which was just a really, really bad call. If we hit that 3, we win the ball game. I think we go up 5 at the time, but I think that had to be. But I think what people don't know is when in 2006, when we got shunned by the NCAA, of all things, we had to play Stanford in the first round of the NIT. But thank goodness we were at Hammonds. And I didn't know what I was going to do because we were all walking around like, what's the show now that the dead people, I don't watch it, but the dead people are walking all over. But anyway, we were a bunch of dead people walking around, mummies and stuff. And I didn't know what I was going to do to get these guys ready. I mean, I had no idea. And, Devin Mitchell was such a quiet kid and hard to get these guys going. I had a lot of quiet kids and stuff, but I walked in and I just, I wrote on the board, and I don't know if Devin was part of that team or not, but I remember Blake Ahern was, and I just walked in on the dry erase board and I wrote the words NCAA. And then I wrote underneath it, were they right or were they wrong? Are we right or were they wrong? And, or were we right, were they wrong? And I just walked out. I just said, that's all I got, guys. And we came out. You thought the place was on fire. And we had Stanford down, I think, 20 in the first half and ended up winning the game by 13. But you're taking a Pac-12 team, Pac-10 team at the time, and we were unbelievable. And then if you remember right, we beat Houston and a shot at the buzzer, and then we go to play Louisville to go to Madison Square Garden, and there was no way in the world we were going to beat Rick Pitino on his home court at Freedom Hall. That just wasn't going to happen. But I was really proud of those kids. Those would be 2 moments that were really big for me.
Definitely, and I remember those those games quite well. And like I said, I didn't mean to make most of the podcast about SMS/MSU, but being my alma mater, of course, it was naturally going to be kind of the course for the conversation. But I do want to talk about too what you're doing now at Oklahoma State and kind of what your day-to-day duties are and how everything's going there.
It's going great. I come in every day. I evaluate everything. As I told you, I may end up cooking for a tailgate. I may have kids come out to the house that need help with something or this or that. I may watch a game and tell coach, this is what I think we can do. I evaluate practice. I keep notes all the way during practice. During the season, I'll give a report to coach almost daily. Right now, this time of year, maybe once 2-3 weeks, coach will come by my little cubicle and we'll visit. I'm basically, I'm an analyst. I'm not the analyst where a computer type guy. I'm an analyst that I just try to analyze what's going on with our guys, and I give coach my opinion. And he asks for it, or if any of these assistants need help, hey, we're looking at this kid. Will you look at him on film? Tell me what you think. I'll do that. I can't be on the floor coaching, but I can be on the floor observing. And I can't go on the road recruiting, but I can certainly, when recruits come in, I can be here for the official visits and the unofficials and be around the parents and help as much as I can. And then I do a lot of speaking opportunities that, head coaches, they just can't get out as much as they want to. And they get so many speaking opportunities. So I try to take a lot of those off the coach's list. And I do a lot of speaking. And I spoke last week in Oklahoma City. I just came back from the United States Basketball Writers Association and spoke at their end of the year college banquet there at St. Louis at the Missouri Athletic Club. And so I do a lot of speaking, Tyler.
That's awesome, and I've watched on YouTube a couple of your speakers, and I could definitely see where you would have made a good governor too back in the day. But I think, like you said, you're blessed with the coaching and the opportunities. And with that, I want one more question before we get into our last segment, Tyler's Five. Being as how successful you were in coaching and just life in general and helping people, what is some advice you would give our listeners who want to coach, or even if it's not coaching, want to aspire to be whatever it is they want to be for their career? What piece of advice would you give them?
Well, I think, well, it's let me give you four things that I think are really important. Number one, you got to work your ass off no matter what it is, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's doing your homework, whether it's your job, whether it's how you act around people. You have to work your ass off each and every day. Number two, you got to pay attention. I just think you have to pay attention to people around you, pay attention to details, completely pay attention. And that's really hard to do in this day and age because we are in an attention span deficit society right now. Third thing, I think you got to fall in love, Tyler. And I'm not talking about with a person. Whatever you're going to do in life, you got to fall in love with it. And if you don't have something that you're in love with, you better find it because you're not going to be happy. For 41 years, I have not gone to work. For 41 years, I just woke up and had an opportunity to do things that I really enjoyed doing. And I think the fourth thing is it's really important to me. You've got to engage. You've got to engage with people every day, and you have to do that on a daily basis. And one of the things I go back to what my dad taught me was treat everybody you meet as if they're the most important person in the world. My dad was a minister, and my dad was the guy that was the counselor and the preacher. And my dad was the guy that showed up to the house when someone had just passed away, or showed up to the house to let someone know that one of their loved ones had passed away. And I watched my dad do that all throughout my life. And that's a hard thing to do when you have to tell somebody. One of my dad's favorite stories to tell is the hardest thing he ever did was he had to wake up a little girl at 3 o'clock in the morning because the father couldn't tell her that her mother had passed away. And my dad had to do it. And he said, it's the hardest thing he's ever done. And you just, in life, we have to have a mission statement. We have to have a game plan. And you got to wake up with that every single day. And you just got to try your best to do that. And as I said, I've done some really stupid things in my life. And I've done some things that I really regret. But doing all of those, Tyler, every one of those were opportunities that allowed me to learn or to get stronger or to get better, because it's the only way we can. So if you're not making mistakes, if you haven't screwed up, if you have done stupid stuff, then you're not learning. And the learning process is that you learn from those things that you did. And my wife said, until they come up with a surgery that will put a speed bump between your mouth and your brain, we're still going to have to learn from our mistakes on a daily basis.
I could see Angie saying that, because she said that, I think verbatim, those exact words on the Dan Patrick show the day after that post-game presser.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And she's still right today.
Awesome. Well, Coach, I really appreciate all of that. And again, it's just great to not only reminisce about Springfield, Missouri, but just your coaching career in general. And I really enjoyed, watching you as a coach and your staff. And you used the term throughout the podcast that stuck with me, the word we. Not once, Coach, did you ever say, I did this or I did that and me. It was we, because, and by we, I know, being a former coach myself, you're talking about everybody from the managers, players, Angie, your kids, athletic directors. And I think that's really important in coaching too, because it's about the team and it's a we. And so I just really appreciate that kind of mindset as well about you.
Well, I hope so, because it is we. And Tyler, I've not done one thing in my life that I created on my own. Everything I either stole off looking at your paper during the test, or sneaking a recipe. People brag on my brisket all the time, and I go, well, you could thank Terry Black for this out of Super Smokers in Eureka, Missouri, because he taught me how to do this. Or now I get all of my tricks betrayed from the guy that was our dadgum beat writer. Lyndall Scranton is now like the barbecue connoisseur there in Springfield. So now I'm learning from Lyndall. But everything that I've been able to do in my lifetime is because someone else taught me. And like I said, I've been very fortunate.
That's awesome. And again, Coach, really appreciate you taking time to do this. And I tell you what, we will, I'm going to come to a game. I promise you this year, I'm coming to a game in Stillwater. And if you don't mind, not to put you on the spot, but I would love to try some of your barbecues sometime. Specifically, I'm a big brisket fan myself. So.
Well, brisket, you can't cook brisket until you read the book of Job. Yeah. Because cooking briskets, you have to be a patient person. And yes. I'm not a real patient person. But I'm proud of my brisket. And I don't know if you remember, Tyler, but we used to do media day. We would serve all the media barbecue.
Yep.
And it never ceased to amaze me that there's probably 3 people that covered Southwest Missouri State basketball religiously. But on media day, we'd have 150. We'd have everybody from kicking cowboy country to the classic rock station coming in. And I think all they ever did was give the scores of the games. But man, on media day, man, we had a lot of people showing up saying they were interested in the Bears.
Absolutely. I could definitely see that. And like I said, I enjoy, I've got a smoker that I got when I was living in St. Louis, and I love firing up the smoker here and put barbecue in, but there's just nothing like Midwest barbecue. And every time I go home, that's what I crave. So, yeah, anyway, are you ready for Tyler's 5, which is just 5 kind of get to know you questions that have absolutely nothing to do with anything. It's just kind of made to put you on the spot and get to know you a little bit better.
You bet, buddy. Let's go, Tyler.
All right. First one, and of course it has to be about barbecue. You got to tell me your favorite barbecue spot.
Well, that's impossible because they're just so many. And I will tell you this, one thing that I did when I went out recruiting before 9/11 happened. No matter where I went, I would always find a barbecue place. I would buy the local sauce. I would go out into the parking lot after I ate there, and I would write a review of that barbecue place, and I would bring a menu home. If they didn't have a take-home menu, I'm just going to have to admit this when I get to the Golden Gates, or the Pearly Gates. I'm going to have to tell the Lord I did steal a few menus in my day, but I still have that file. It's probably, Tyler, I bet there's 200 menus in there, but I've had some great barbecue over the days. And remember, my favorite line, the worst barbecue I ever had was sensational. So I love barbecue, buddy.
Absolutely. And you'll love this story talking about traveling. So, I do a lot of traveling, and every time I go, I don't take the menus, Coach, but, and you can ask my parents, they've got barbecue sauces at their house from Christmas that I could not fit in my checked-in bag. I will go to when I lived in St. Louis, I love the Schnucks brand barbecue sauce. And I bet, Coach, I bought 25 bottles of their barbecue sauce to bring back to Florida. So even though it's not menus, I sure do fly down a lot of barbecue sauce to Florida from places I'm traveling.
Well, one thing Florida's got, and I know they've got this because up in the northern part of Florida, they've got Sonny's Barbecue, and Sonny's Barbecue is pretty doggone good.
Yes.
And Dickey's is starting to get into the areas. So the Florida people are, the rescue is coming. Just hang on and be patient.
Yes, we've got a Sonny's about 2 miles. I live in Clearwater. We got a Sonny's about 2 miles north that I frequent. So I'm glad that you give them the vote of confidence. Maybe it's not fake after all. Second question: if you could vacation for a week in one place, Coach, where would it be?
Anywhere in the United States. I'm not a foreign traveler. Here's the funny thing, Tyler. I'm a bad vacationer. I don't do vacations very well. I can't sit still. I've always got something going on. So, if all honesty, to answer your question, if I could just spend at my house for a week and do whatever I want, that'd be the greatest vacation for me and the worst vacation for my wife. But, after all of those years of traveling and recruiting and being on the road, it just got to a point where you didn't want to travel anymore. I'll tell you how much I traveled. I just told this story yesterday. I am a titanium lifetime member of Marriott. I do not have to stay in another Marriott hotel my entire life, and I'll still be a lifetime member. And I checked my points a couple of weeks ago because my wife wanted to use a room. I have 1.5 million Marriott reward points.
Wow.
I'm not, it just tells you I'd stay and get these points, but I never go use them. So I'm a bad vacationer, buddy.
I need to get on your schedule because I fly. I've been in New York City the last 4 weeks. I fly home. I play hockey part-time, or I say part-time. It's like a beer league, here in Clearwater, and just started playing about 4 months ago. So I'll fly back for my hockey games and fly back to New York City. And it's I'm like, I practically live on a plane. So I need to get your mindset and learn to stay home. Third question, thick or thin crust pizza?
Oh, thin. At my age, no question, thin. I don't need anything thicker on my plate because I've got the thicker in the body. So I'm a thin guy. I'm a thin and crispy guy. Marty knows it's going to be, and for those that don't know Marty Prather is probably one of the most famous guys at a baseball stadium of all time. They call him Marty the Sign Man, and you can watch any Cardinal broadcast and see him holding up signs, and he's probably the wittiest person I've ever been around. But I'm a thin pizza guy.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up Marty. I know Marty, of course, and when I was living in Chicago and working security for the Cubs, you'll laugh at this. So, there's a rule at Wrigley Field. You can't obstruct views of fans. And one of my supervisors comes over and says, "There's going to be a guy who's in your section. His name's Marty. They call him the sign guy." And I said, They said, he kind of let him do his thing. That's what he's known for. And I said, "I know Marty." I said, "I've known Marty probably longer than you've been working here at Wrigley Field." And they're like, "Well, how do you know him?" And I told them the whole story. And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm very familiar with Marty. He's a great guy. And his chains make a very good pizza down there for sure."
Well, you could do a whole podcast on Wrigley Field and Chicago pizza. I know that. And then Cubby Bears right across the street was owned by a Southern Illinois University alum and a really good booster of the program.
Oh, wow. Okay. I did not know that. That's good to know. I spent most of my time at Murphy's bleachers behind center field, but I'll definitely go in there and support the Saluki alum there next time I'm back in Chicago.
And with Chicago, you could just go ahead and go to Portillo's for me because I am a Portillo's alumnus.
Oh, that is awesome. I will definitely do that. And I'll text you a picture of my sandwich when I'm there. make you jealous. Fourth question, favorite movie, Coach?
Oh, I think it would have to be Field of Dreams. I just absolutely loved it. Loved it.
Have you been to Field of Dreams?
I have not. Mark Stillwell has been there. Mark Stillwell was my sports information director for years at Southwest Missouri State, and brought me back a baseball from there and the field. And of course, when the Major League Baseball had the field there, or the first game, I cried like a baby. So, but I would have to say of all my movies, I loved Hoosiers, but Field of Dreams was probably my favorite movie.
That's great. You definitely have to get up to Dyersville. It's just a neat atmosphere up there, and it's one of those where I think the most touching moment for me when I was there was being able to play catch with my dad and being able to just kind of share that bond. It brought back, emotions of watching the movie. So definitely a place you need to visit, despite, and you can even use your Marriott Rewards members. I'm sure there's a Marriott somewhere around there. Last question, Coach, and I'll let you go. Favorite band?
Oh, the Eagles. No ifs, ands, or buts. I got to see them in 1976. I got to see them in 1980. and I was scheduled to see him when I was assistant with Bill Self at ORU, but Glenn Fry had he had to have surgery or something, and then of course Don Henley played right there in Hammond Center and got to see him there. But I'm a forever Eagles fan. I loved them, and I just you go to their concert and they could play 3 hours of all hit music. So no question, I'm an Eagles, and I love all sorts of music. I really do.
Yeah.
I am very diverse in my music and what I love. But the Eagles, buddy, that's my band.
That's awesome. Coach Barry Hinson, thank you so much. Please tell the family hello, and really, again, just enjoyed our conversation and really admire what you've done in your coaching career and how you've been a big influence on a lot of people, including myself. And looking forward to getting to Stillwater and hopefully maybe catching up and having some barbecue when I'm down there.
That sounds great, Tyler. Thank you. And hi to your family as well. And I send some of that Florida weather, the warm weather, not the hurricane weather, to Oklahoma. But thank you. God bless you, buddy. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Coach. Coach Barry Hinson.